Willa Cather in Jaffrey. So her first visit here was in 1917, and she returned many times over the years, up until that hurricane of '38, when it destroyed a lot of the woods, and it was just kind of disappointing what this town looked like, as well as many towns in New England. Her first trip was in the summer. She visited her friends Jan and Isabel Homburg, who were staying at the Shattuck. Now, Isabel was a great friend of Willa. They both lived in Pittsburgh at the turn of the century, and they traveled Europe together and were great friends, as you heard this morning. And Isabel was a real fan of Willa's work and encouraged her throughout her life. So while at the Shattuck, Willa had a choice of rooms, and she picked the top floor. She would come back to those rooms many, many times. She loved the mountain, which is hidden today, but it might appear at some point. The pine-scented wood and the wildflowers became a favorite place for her to write. Autumn was particularly beautiful for her. As her biographer, Edith Lewis, described her Shattuck room. They had sloping ceilings, like her attic room in the old days in Red Cloud. On the roof directly overhead, she could hear the rain in the wet weather. Her window looked out over the woods and juniper pastures toward the mountain, with its very individual outline. The first summer at the inn was crowded with guests, and to give her greater quiet and seclusion, two Pittsburgh friends who rented a place called High Mowing, not far from the Shattuck, had the idea of putting up a tent in the meadow for Willa to work in. This turned out to be a grand idea. The tent was about a half a mile from the inn, an unused wood road, and across a pasture or two. Willa loved this solitary half-mile walk through the woods and found it best for a possible start to a morning of work.
A considerable part of My Antonia, from page 163 through 263, was written in a little tent which I put up at the bottom of the hill, which slopes from your mother's house towards Stony Brook Farm. The tent was very simple, no floor, pegged down to the ground. Inside it there was nothing but a table and a camp chair. I was living at the Shattuck Inn that summer and autumn. Every morning after a very early breakfast, I used to go up to Stony Brook Farm Road, cut through the hedge into Mrs. Robinson's property and to my tent. I carried my little portfolio with my pens and papers. I always left my ink bottles in the tent. No one disturbed me. I had two good hours of work then, and in the heat of the day I used to climb the stone wall and go back to the inn through the shady wood which still lies at the foot of the hill. The wood was well kept in those days. Lady slippers and hookers' orchid used to grow there. Once in late autumn, I met an agreeable fox in the wood. Of course, some of the people at the hotel knew that I went to write in the tent, but no one knew what I was writing. After the book was published, I never happened to tell anyone that part of it was written in the tent at High Mowing. It's not my habit to talk about any piece of work I have in hand. That would spoil the fun of it. I finished the book in New York that winter, and I think you are the only person to whom I have ever confided the fact that a portion of that particular book was written in the tent. But since you love High Mowing, as I do, and since you really care for the book that was partly written there, it seems to me you ought to know that there is a very real connection between the book and the place. The next summer and autumn I was working in the same tent upon one of ours, but I stayed too late in October and got a bad touch of influenza. It was a very rainy autumn, and the tent, having no floor, used to get pretty wet. After that year, the Shaddocks were kind enough to let me have several rooms at the top floor of the hotel, and I worked very happily there on other books. Since the hurricane destroyed the beautiful wood behind the hotel, I have not gone there so often. My favorite walk for the afternoon was through the wood as far as the Ark and then back to the Shattuck Inn. The next time I am in Jaffrey, I will certainly go see your mother at High Mowing, and I hope you will be there to have tea with us. You say you have a personal reason for writing to me about Antonia? But have I not even a more personal reason for replying to you? That book and that place are always associated in my mind, though the actual scene of the Western book was so far away. Cordially yours, and hoping we shall meet in Jaffrey, Willa Cather.
My grandmother. For 3 years we moved to Blackhawk, a clean, well-planted little prairie town. My grandparents were getting too old for the heavy work of a farm, and as I was now 13, they thought I ought to be in school. It wasn't long before we felt like town people. Soon after, Antonia went to live in town with the Cutters. On Saturday evenings there was dancing, and I would see Antonia there. She had a boyfriend named Larry. Where's Larry tonight?
Out on the rails somewhere. He'll be back next week.
May I walk you home? Look at all these houses. Everyone is asleep.
Here we are.
What's with all the trees in front of the house?
Mrs. Cutter says she wants privacy.
Eesh, this place is creepy. Hey, we've been friends a long time.
My longest friend.
So, I think you should kiss me goodnight.
Okay. I could do that. Jim, don't!
Why not?
No, Jim, I'll tell your grandmother on you.
Lena lets me kiss her,
She what?
and I like you more.
You've been kissing Lena?
Uh-huh.
If she's up to her nonsense with you, I'll scratch her eyes out.
She likes me.
Come on.
Did you hear what I said?
Look, don't be a fool like the other boys around here. Just fools who are going to sit at home all their life telling stories. You go off to school, see oceans and world.
Away from you.
Yes. I want you to do big things. I'm proud of you.
You're the only one I care about. I guess I'm just a little kid to you still.
Well, yeah. But a kid I like a lot. Look, if I see you with Lena, I'm gonna tell your grandmother. Stay away from her.
I get it.
At Harvard, where I've been going. I'm going to study the law now.
Study the law?
To become a lawyer.
Jim the lawyer.
I know.
What about poetry and theater?
I'm 20 years old now.
I'm 24.
I had this great teacher in Lincoln named Gaston Cleric. He's the reason I ended up in Boston the last 2 years. God, it has been so long since we talked.
So long.
Anyway, he died last winter, pneumonia.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I really believe he missed being a great poet. He could have been, but he squandered too much feeling in the heat of talk. He was always telling us stories and these just brilliant insights into poetry and life, when he should have been writing them all down.
Maybe you could write them down for him.
Maybe I will. When he died, I realized that I can't be a scholar. I get lost in that life, shut off from everyone. I'd always be yearning for you and everything here. Then one of my mother's relatives contacted me, said I could work in his law office in New York when I'm done, and that sort of sealed the deal. I'll be going back to New York. I can't imagine.
Of course, it means you're going away for good now.
No,
Do you like living in the city?
I've learned to love it in many ways.
I'd be miserable. I'd die of lonesomeness. I like being where I know every stack and tree, where the ground is friendly. I want to live and die here. I'm going to raise my girl here.
She's beautiful.
You met?
Back at the house.
She's my heart walking around on little legs.
She's lucky to have you.
I can't wait till she's old enough to tell her about all the things we used to do when we were younger. I want to tell her about my papa. Feel him here. Same with you. That's why I'll never be lonesome.
Tony,
Yes?
I think about you all the time. More so than anyone else. You really are a part of me.
How can you say that after you've met so many people? And I've disappointed you so much. Nothing.
No one else could mean more.
I'm so glad we had each other when we were little.
Me too. About us, it was growing darker, and I had to look hard to see her face, which I always meant to carry with me. The closest, realest face at the very bottom of memory. I'll come back. I promise.
Maybe you will, but even if you don't, you're here.
Midland plains of North America was as unreal and endless as a dream. I always seemed to begin there, in dreams, in darkness. But first her name, Antonia. All the years that have passed have not dimmed my memory of that first glorious autumn. Name? What name? She asked. I'm Jim. Jim! Jim! I asked her, want to go see the prairie dogs? And owls, she cried, and we ran across the prairie watching owls return to earthen homes. Antonia couldn't quite understand how they had wings but lived in prairie dog holes. She insisted owls need live high in trees. I told her, Otto says those holes probably go down 200 feet. No, she squealed, I don't believe it, it's true, I insisted, how else do they drink? We laid on the grass while she practiced her reading until her father crossed the ridge, walking slowly, his catch in hand and carrying a shotgun. Seeing him, she jumped up, look, my papa! And as we ran across the field to meet Mr. Shimerda, she told me he was sick all the time. At home, he played violin all the time, for weddings and for dance. Such beautiful music. Here, never. I begged for him to play, and he shake his head no. When winter came, Antonia declared, the snow changes the whole world. Beautiful. Sadly, the winter also brought tragedy to the Shimerda family.